Hey guys, Chip here, and this is part 2 of this trim sheet exercise. I'm going to go over how you can quickly create very complex geometry using a single material and some trim sheets, as long as you understand how to UV map objects. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. But first, I'd like to say that this is not a production pipeline for game assets. This is a production pipeline for concept development. This is an extremely fast and rapid workflow for creating some hyper-detailed science fiction scenes. So if you want to have discussions about topology and other things, that will have to wait for another video. But what we're going to do here is create a scene very much like this one, which has extremely limited geometry, yet has very complex maps, displacement maps, texture maps, and everything to let you generate lots of the unique geometry. Now, one thing I'll mention is that these orange reactors and these people are not part of the materials, but everything else you see in this particular image is generated with one material. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, as you can see, this is a fairly plain scene. We have this generic material applied to just about everything in this scene. And it's set up from this particular view. So I've got like objects out here. They have the same material. And we'll talk about this material in just a second, but this is the same material. And if I just go into here and look at this, and you'll see that none of the materials are different from each other, right? So it's all the same. So what we want to do is we want to add enough resolution to these models by subdividing them, and then add a displacement map on top of that to get the kind of detail that we want. So let's take a look at what we want. I'm going to go over here and we're going to basically take a height map and create a new texture called a displacement map. And when we do, that same material is going to render up a bit differently, but it's different for each object. And what do I mean by that? If we look at this object, I'm going to look at the modifiers, and you can see that we have a subdivision modifier, simple, and a displace here. And if I look up here, I've got another subdivision, but this is not a simple, it's a Catmull-Clark. And these numbers may differ based on the actual model that we're working with. And now one of the things that this gives us by using modifiers for each separate object is it gives us the ability to actually view these in EEVEE as well. All these objects are still displaced inside of EEVEE. In fact, they're even displaced inside of the solid shader, so we can see exactly what we're doing. So what I want to do is let's get started with something like just this desk, for instance. So let's take this. I'm going to isolate it. Now, the actual displays are missing in here because I've mapped those separately, but we can actually map them if we want to. In fact, maybe I'll do that. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to tab into this model, and you can see it's got a bit of resolution already. In fact, what I want to do is I'm going to, just so we can start from scratch, is let's just go ahead and say A, X, limited dissolve. And let's just make it like that. At this point, we've lost all the UVs. So I'm going to turn off. I just want to basically look at the model and see what we've got. Now, okay, so I've gone ahead and removed some of these other objects that were in here. And let's tab into this. So we can see we've just got, 244 faces. And we want to create something exciting over that. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tab into here. Let's add these screens. So how do we create something really cool out of this? So the first thing we're going to need to do is we need to figure out how to subdivide this. And there's a bunch of ways to do that. And there's a little tool that we have that I use. You could manually do this. You could basically use knife cuts, but I'm going to use this tool that we create, which is called Slice It, which is under the tool command. Actually, we'll have a new version coming out that'll have its own button, but right now it's under the tool command. And the number of slices are going to be in the XY, and we only need maybe 30. 30 might be good. Let's see what happens. Then we just go over here and we turn on wireframe so we can see it, or I can just go like this. Doesn't really matter. And then I can say slice it, and there you can see. So this is 30 across here, and I don't know how many down here. But so let's go down here, and I want to do the same here. We just want to be in the Z axis now. So we're going to slice in the Z axis up and down, and I'm going to say 5, something like maybe 8. Let's try 8, and let's slice it. And there we go. Okay, so now we have enough geometry to actually do something with as far as displacements go. So once we've done this, I'll probably just go ahead and jump into the UV editing panel. So what I've done is in this view, I've got the camera view over here, and I can see my model, which looks really crazy right now because we don't have any UVs projected correctly. But we have over here, we have our material, right? That's our material. And here's our scene view. And over here is our UV mapping and everything. Let's just go in here and let's turn this into a wireframe. We can see that way we can move a little quicker. And also, if I look over here in our modifiers, you'll see that we don't have any real modifiers that we can use yet. So let's just go ahead and we're going to add a subdivision surface. And if I go back into my wireframe, turn on the wireframe here, you can see that when we add our subdivision surface, we're going to go simple. And I'm going to turn off optimal display, and you can see we've added some resolution. Now I want to set this to something maybe like 2. This isn't going to be the final one, but it's going to be enough to tell me what's going on 3. So let's just let levels 3 and viewpoint 3. And then I'm going to add another modifier, which is called a displace modifier. And by the way, I'm using version 3.6.5, even though version 4.0 is out. But I got to tell you that I'm not a happy camper when it comes to version 4.0. There's too many bugs in it for me. I don't like a lot of the interface changes they made. So I've added this displacement modifier, and I can create a new displacement for that. And I'm going to call this one displace 2 because I already have one already displaced. I'm going to create this displace 2, and I click this little button over here, and it takes me to this tab over here. And in here, it shows me displace 2. It's an image, and I can grab an image. And the one I'm going to use is I'm going to use this height EXR. And this is the map right here that we're seeing. This is the ambient map. The height EXR is here, and we're going to talk about how we make this map in not too distant future tutorial as well. But right now, there's 3 maps here that we're using. We're using a emissive map, which is this map, right? So it just shows you emissive stuff. The height EXR map, and we're using a diffuse with no ambient map. So here's the diffuse with no ambient map. So I like to work with the diffuse. It doesn't really matter what's displayed up here, but this allows me to see a little bit better what's going on. So now this is done, everything should be default at this point. And let's just go back to our display. So here's one of the key things. Our coordinates need to be UV, right? So that's important. We need to make sure they're UV. And then we're going to change the strength as we go. So for instance, let's look at one of these other desks. Strength 0.2, 0.063 is a mid-level. So I'm going to go ahead and just, for now, say 0.2 and 0.063. And we're going to leave that like that. So that gives us a starting place. We can mess with this later. So now I'm going to go out of perspective view. And the first thing I'm going to try is I'm going to say select all. Let's turn off our wireframe. Let's tab into this and hit A. We have this mode into face mode. And let's say U, which is the same thing as over here. We have UV. And I'm going to basically say cube projection. So now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and talk about the material. So I'm going to actually create a brand new material. I'm going to call this the demo material. And I'll come over here and I'm going to basically use the principled BSDF shade, Shift A, and we're going to use an image texture. And here we go. And I'm going to put this into the base color. And then I'm going to open up that no ambient image, which is that one over here that we were looking at before, right there. So you can see how that works. And this is an RGB texture. Now I'm going to Shift D this, bring it down, and I'm going to add the bump map texture. And so I'm going to go over here, and this is going to be the EXR, the height EXR. And that's going to automatically set this as linear space. And then I'm going to put this into a bump node. And I want it in the bump height. So that goes there, and then the normal goes right into the normal map. And I like it something like 0.2, 0.2, something you can find, tab 0.2, 0.2. And sometimes I'll go ahead and also add a RGB curves color ramp in here. And why do I do this? Sometimes I want to adjust this color, and I might want to make it just a little bit lighter, something like that might work better. So that's what that does. Let's just go ahead and move these down, and we're going to drag one more shift of this, Shift D down here, and I'm going to make this one the emissive, and that's going to go directly into the emission color. And the emission strength 1, we can make it maybe 2, I don't know, we can try 2, whatever, but you'll see that what that's going to do is every time it sees one of these light maps from the emission panel, remember the emission panel is right here, so this is what that looks like. So every time it sees one of these, it's going to actually make it bright so that it doesn't get dark at all. So for instance, go in here and just say, let's turn off the scene lights and scene world. You can see that these maps are still very bright. Okay, so that is our full material. That's it, nothing more. Let's go back up in here into the diffuse map. And here's our diffuse map. Let's move these over a little bit. And let's turn our overlays on here and let's tab into this. Now, what I might want to do is let's start off by selecting just the different parts of this. So for instance, let's grab the flat part, shift here, this flat part and this one. And I want to select all of the ones that are coplanar to this. So if I go under select and I say select similar coplanar, and that will get all the ones that are coplanar to both of those. Now I've got those set, and now I want to set these up as a projection map. So I want to get the view I want, which is like this, and say U, and use the same thing as just going over here and using the UV right here. And I want to say project from view like this. Okay, and then with that done, I'll say Q, show overlays, turn that off. And what I want to do is I want to hit A over here with this. This is set to UV select mode, and we're in face mode, and we can hit G. And so let's just move these around till we find something that we like. And we may see that there's not a whole lot here that we like. So we may have to hit S and scale them down, and G, and maybe we do something like this. I'm just going to move things around till I find something that I think might be somewhat interesting, right? Here we go, like that. Let's try that. Now that we're in displace mode, I might want to turn on this little button, and I can see what it's going to do. So you can see that it puts these divots in the back here. So I might want to say, okay, G, let's move this. I can do it in real time, but I may find that by doing it in real time, I end up with a performance issue. And so I think the other thing I can do is I can just basically take this whole thing and say S and shrink it down and go G and just stick it over here like something like this, right? So, and that's going to make it all very plain colored, right? I just got a couple little things on the side here, over here, and I may like that. That's nice. It's got this thing over here. Let's go back into our overlays, and we got to turn this off so we can see what we're doing. Let's just grab this one and say Q, and I'm going to basically, in this one, instead of saying, by the way, I've mapped this as coplanar, I'm going to say select link flat faces. So I just have those. So now I can say G, and let's just move these over to somewhere where I think might be something interesting. So I'm going to scale these up quite a bit, and I'm going to sit them like, let's rotate them anyway. So let's just do that, G. So what I would do is I'm going to move these around a little bit so they look a little bit like this. Okay, so now Q, show overlays. Let's turn our displace back on, see what we have. You can start to see, okay, that's neat, that's working. We've got this little funky thing here, but I think that we're going to fix that here in just a second. Now let's select this face right here. Don't forget our overlays are turned off, but I just know by clicking here I can select them. Q, and I can say link flat faces, and then scale, and then G, and then I can move these to where I want them. And you can see, let's just move over just a little bit, something like that. Okay, so we have that. So that's going to be our top faces. Now let's go ahead, and I want to grab some of the side stuff. So let's tab into this. Let's go back Q, show overlays, and let's get this side, these sides, 3. By the way, notice I'm trying to select and I can't, and that's because displace is turned on. So you really have to turn that off. So let's go here. I'm going to hit Alt and click there, and it's going to select everything around there except for these faces. So I can hit Shift. We'll just select these. Okay, so we have these faces selected. You can see them up here. I can go over here and say A, and I can say G. They've already been mapped, remember, cubically mapped. So that means that they're pretty good for stuff. So let's just go ahead and let's see what happens when we do this. Oh gosh, that's terrible. Gee, let's move them down. Let's move them into an area like this. Let's see what does that do. Let's turn off our displace, and now we're going to do the same here. I'm going to hold here and hold the Alt key and just click here, here, and then I'm going to say Q, link flat faces, and say Q. Let's do coplanar, so it gets all of those. And so now I can see all of those over there. I can put it over here if I want. Q, show overlays. See, it's got this like ribbed section going on. So that might be good. Let's say G, let's move it around so it lines up nicely. Okay, and that's our rib section for the table. And then let's go ahead and let's grab the front face, like this one and this one, and this one, those front faces, and say Q, and we'll go select link fact faces, and then I'm going to say Control plus, and just select some of these that are part of this, yeah, something like that, and then I can go over here and select these two, and maybe these two. Oops. Zoom in and say Q link fact. So that's it. So I got those, and now you can see they're all set up over here. And I'm going to just scale these up a lot, and then say G. I'm going to move these over here, down into some of these areas in here. Now there's, and I'll take these and move these down, like scale them up. Then I take these and move these around. Let's see. Not sure where they are, but I might take, so this one right here, for instance, this one and this one, I want to definitely get those off of there, and let's just move these somewhere like. So notice that that boundary isn't being represented correctly. So what I can do at this point is I can just go in here and say, just at any angle, doesn't want UV unwrap. So I can just say unwrap, and it's going to unwrap those. And now when I shrink them down, you can see they're going to actually map correctly across that boundary. So notice that there's the boundary right there, and they're mapping correctly across it, which is nice. So I'm going to basically do something like this. Let's hit the displacement and see what we got. Okay, and that's because we have this radius, because we have this going across this radius thing. So let's just hit G, and let's move them down a little bit more. So now that I'm looking at this, I can start to see that, okay, I think we have a little too much displacement here. So I'm going to go back into our displace, and instead of strength 0.02, I'm going to make it 0.15. And that's going to reduce it a little bit. And I think that's going to help some of these fixtures down here. So G, let's move this here. Okay, so now you're saying, well, maybe that doesn't look too good, but watch what happens when I hit 4 on this. Everything pops quite nicely. This is maybe a little too heavy over here, and actually I don't have that thing going across the boundary correctly. So let's go show overlays on here, and let's turn this off, and let's select one of these and one of these, say Q, and select link flat faces, and let's do this. Get this too. There's that corner, and I think there's a corner in here too. Yeah. Okay, and then I can say U unwrap, and then I can say A, and now here's where I use another add-on called UV squares to straighten this out. So I go into the end panel, UV squares, I say to grid by shape, and so that'll straighten out everything nicely on this, although some of the things not quite. It tries to do a good job, but some things it didn't. Actually, let's just go ahead and deselect these, and then let's select all A to grid by shape. There you go. Now that's straightened it all out nicely, and then we'll fix those later. But now with that done, I'm going to rotate it, escape, hit A to select everything, rotate, and shrink. I'll put this right on the edge right here, something like this. Q, show overlays, and I can turn this displacement on. See what we got. Yeah, that one a little more right there. So as you can see, we're just dragging things around till we get to something that we like. Okay, so let's tab Q, show overlays. I'm gonna go over here again and turn this off, and we're going to select the link flat faces. Actually, let's go grab these first. And let's say you unwrap those. Yeah, and we're going to shrink those really up. We're going to make those a solid color, so that's what those do right there. Okay, so this is actually looking pretty good. We might want to do something with this table. So let's go in here, and I'm going to grab this, select those, and say A over here. And I want to just basically use the G key to move those to something that's a little more interesting, maybe this. Okay, and then we've added this kind of interesting little cable trough detail over there, which kind of works nicely. We have these side faces, which actually, when I look at them, I think I'm going to leave them alone, but I'm going to have to grab these, see where they are. Those are here, and they are definitely not working. So I'm going to stick those down here like this, and they're going to be fine. Okay, let's tab into this again. Tab and turn this off, and let's grab this, and this, and I think L. So I just hit the L button. I select all of those, And what I want to do is I want to project these from view. So that's, neither one of these are the right view, but if I hold the Alt key down, I can get one that's pretty good. Say U, project from view, and then I can just select what I want, like these right here, and say scale, let's move them out right there. G, let's move it into here. Scale, there's that one, and then I can grab this one, and let's put him SX, we're scaling the X direction. Make it this way, G, and just move it right like that. There we go. And then this one over here, I'm gonna take this one and let's move it down here, scale it down. I want to grab that little corner right there so that it has this corner thing going on. So you can see it's got this little angled corner on there. And then if I show the overlays now, you'll see that. And if I go into my scene lighting, you can see that's what that would look like. Okay, the next thing is I want to really optimize this particular model. So let's say that we're done with this. Now I want to optimize this because if I tab into this and select everything, it's not going to tell me. Let's see, let's go back. Here's the best way to do it is we'll go to layout, and you can see for this object, we've got 884,000 triangles. So you can see it's ragged across the edges there. But this stuff's starting to look okay. So let's do a save because this is going to be a bit memory intensive. But once I've done this, I'm going to go in here in this gray shaded mode because I want to look at some of this detail that we're generating. And I'm going to hit this button one time and go to 5 and see how nice that is. And now that's much nicer. Now I'm at 3.5. So I can get all the way up to about 15 million on my computer. Your computer may vary. So I may just go one more, 6. Just one more. And now you can see that we've got a lot of great detail in this model. Okay, now you're saying, yeah, I don't need something with 14,000 tries. So that's actually probably too many. Come to think of it, I may want to go back down to 5 because it's going to take a while for me to convert that. But this, even at 5, we've got 3.5 million tries, which is still too many. So what do we do now? How do we convert this so that it's going to work? What we do is we're going to apply all the modifiers, just like that. It's going to take a little bit for this to happen. Now that it's done, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create outside of this object, let's just Shift A, mesh, a cube, right? So where'd that go? Okay, G, let's move it over here. So the reason why I do this is because the process that I'm going to show you on how to reduce the number of faces is a process that requires a number of steps, but you don't want them to be redundant. And sometimes that can happen. So I'm going to hit Tab, go into here, hit A, and then I'm going to go under Mesh, Cleanup, and I'm going to say Decimate Geometry. And this number, I want to change the ratio to 0.1. Now, if I have to go and change it twice, it's going to take forever because it's going to take a while for this to happen. So let's tab out of that and let X delete that. Now, when we go into here and we tab into it and select all and say Mesh, Cleanup, Decimate Geometry, it's going to decimate it the very first time as we're waiting at a 0.1 resolution. So this is taking, let's see, it started about 2840. Okay, and it finished at 58. So it took about maybe 20 seconds to do that. But when it's done, you can take a look at it and figure out, is the geometry still look pretty good? And you can see it does look pretty good. It looks pretty darn good. But there may be some issues. And so I always add a weighted normal at the end of this and keep sharp and flat faces. And that seems to fix a lot of stuff that you may run into. Now let's show the overlays. Now we have a model at 353. So I like to go to about 250. So I might say A and do a mesh, and we'll say decimate geometry again. Now this will happen pretty fast, so I can afford to adjust it. So Q, show overlays. So now we're at 35,000, which is too small. You can see that we're losing a lot of data in here at this point. Although notice how the maps are still perfect. But what I'm going to do is instead of 0.1, let's do something like 0.6. And you can see now it's at what, 212. I think around 200,000 per model like this, a little 200, 300,000 is a good place to sit. That's really the whole workflow for You can see it does a pretty nice job, and you can continue to do this for every object in your scene. You get pretty good at it after you start moving fast. You'll see that things generate pretty quickly for you. And don't forget that in the event that you have, let's say Shift A, Mesh, Cube. Let's put a cube in here, and let's just tab into it and Control R, and let's just put a loop into it like this, and let's just grab this and E. If you have objects that basically are rectilinear like this, sometimes to create that very first mesh, adding a remesh modifier may be the trick, right? Let's look at the wireframe here again. So notice that if I go into sharp and I hit like maybe 4, that would be a good first start for that. Look how perfect that is. So sometimes using the remesh modifier is better than using the slice it tool in terms of speed. And even if we tab into this and hit 2 and grab this and move it down a little bit like this, so we're not quite the same, but if we tab out, we still get a pretty good mesh that we can work with. So just keep that in mind. That's something that's worth remembering. So anyway, I hope that you found this helpful. It's a great way to very quickly outfit a scene with a lot of high tech. The trick is in the trim sheets that you use. And so the next video, I'm going to talk about how you create a trim sheet. This is an ambient one, image, resize. This was at 8K, so it's an 8K ambient trim sheet. So it's pretty high resolution. So you can zoom in, you're going to get some pretty good resolution on this. And of course, the height map is the same. It's another 8K one, and it's got super high resolution. The only one that doesn't, I think, is the emissive one. I think that's 2K. You get the idea. But anyway, point being that it's a nice workflow for rapidly creating assets and reusable assets for that matter, using a single set of trim sheets. So thanks for watching. See you online. Bye.